Been told that the story of suburbia is a story of race and redlining. The racism in that delightful project was real. Today, the suburbs are fully integrated. We have gentrified suburbs, black suburbs, immigrant suburbs, you name it. Suburbia is officially an equal opportunity landscape. The other disaster, though, it just continues. It's pretty much baked into the very dirt, and it doesn't discriminate. When in the sweat of his entrepreneurial brow, William Levitt was designing the blueprint for housing outside the city line, he nonchalantly disregarded the counsel of sociologists, artists, newspaper critics, and the people in his own milieu, entrepreneurs. I mean, those of them who were blessed with a modicum of good taste, anyway. This resulted in the suburbia we all know and adore, and no one has any idea what to do with it anymore. Which raises the question, how did we even get here, and what did we do to deserve this joy? Levitt seems to have leaned heavily on the philosophy of military logicians, Henry Ford, and contemporary European architects who were of the opinion that a house was just a machine for living in. A machine for living in. So shanties and jalopies, with no room for the human soul. That's okay, we can live with that, I suppose, right?
That's a bit too harsh, wouldn't you say?
You tell me.
Okay, go on.
Castrum was the term for a Roman camp. Fighting the enemy was just one of the legion's duties. On the march, scouts would run ahead to map the terrain, assess whatever exotic dangers might await the legions, and report to the commanders. When danger levels were deemed sufficiently high, the legion's engineers and builders would construct a camp, a real camp, with walls and watchtowers. The legionnaires' tents would be positioned on a grid. There were actual streets. Now, in the morning, the entire thing would be dismantled. Most of the components would be loaded back on the wagons, and the legion would march on. However, if the commandant perceived the area as suitable, with easy access to water, with arable land, and lots of edible fauna running around and frolicking in the water, something sturdier would be built, a more permanent camp. And if that proved to be self-sustaining, civilian builders and engineers would arrive to assist the military. Wooden structures would be disposed of, stone structures would be erected. In this manner, a number of well-known cities were founded by the Romans: London, Paris, Vienna, Lyon, Budapest, Cologne, Barcelona, Milan.
Florence?
Yes, Florence too, in a manner of speaking. Following the fall of Rome, the practice petered out, but folks remembered. Like today, armies absolutely have construction battalions, builders and engineers. William Levitt was a lieutenant in the Seabees, a construction battalion during World War II. The experience taught him a lot about efficiency and discipline. One important detail seems to have eluded him: the fact that military construction, especially that of living quarters, barracks, is provisional, which is to say, temporary, which is to say, disposable. Something you put together rapidly and abandon or demolish once it's no longer needed. His second source of inspiration seems to have been Henry Ford, the pioneer of the assembly line, a system where each worker performs one task over and over again. You save on training costs. Before the war, Levitt worked in his father's firm, Levitt and Sons, specializing in constructing upscale houses in Long Island, New York. Here's an example of such a house. It's not much, but at least it's a house. So he must have known a thing or two about architecture, like its history, and also the new ideas coming from the Bauhaus gang, Le Corbusier, and America's own Frank Lloyd Wright, who for decades had been designing shit like this. Proponents of the Bauhaus philosophy, also known as international style, perceived ornament as unnecessary, backward, and dishonest. Let me ask you this. When a woman spends what seems to be an inordinate amount of time picking a dress and putting on makeup, is she being dishonest? When a man spends some time picking a suit, is he being dishonest?
That's not the same.
Oh, please. We're just as vain as women, we just hide it better. Well, some of us anyway.
If you say so.
I do say so, but that's not the point. Dignity is not vanity. Plus, of course, there's the civility factor. Either you respect your neighbor and make an effort to look presentable, or you disdain them because they're dirt under your feet and their opinions and sentiments are beneath contempt, unworthy of being taken into consideration by such an exalted person as yourself. Harmony, beauty, grace. Those are an integral part of humanity's spiritual and psychological grammar. Something tells me that the Savior never looked unkempt or disheveled when he preached. Am I wrong? So instead of ornament, we now have gratuitously distorted geometrical shapes. That's not really architecture. It's clowning. Look at this, and this, and this. Far be it from me to oppose clowning. I'm quite fond of it, really. I am. But no matter how good a joke is, it only works once. Hearing or seeing the same joke over and over again for days, years, decades makes you loathe the author. Or you look at it and suddenly you're experiencing something called Spanish shame, which is to say vicarious embarrassment. It's this acute surge of spiritual discomfort, embarrassment you feel for someone who is not even in the room. I mean, someone signed those building permits. Someone designed the damn thing. They're actual people. They went ahead and they did this. Okay, so nothing much of civilian value was built anywhere on the planet during World War II. Everything was repurposed, everything served the war effort. Construction fell behind dramatically in the United States, which naturally resulted in a completely unexpected housing crisis. Levitt's solution would have worked wonderfully as a stopgap. Those barracks, glorified shanties built as homes, could have been a reasonable temporary measure, something to tide us over till we put together something fit for civilized living, perhaps right next to the same area. There was room back then. He purchased land, he purchased lots outside the city line in Long Island, New York. They were cheap, woods, potato fields, nothing particularly valued, at least back then. He devised a system that mirrored Ford's assembly line. It had those, celebrated 26 or 27 steps, executed in the exact same order, the same sequence. Each team would only focus on one of those steps, and that eliminated the need for trained workers. Once a team finished their step, they would just move on to the next house. First came the teams focusing on heavy machinery operations, leveling the raw land and paving the master planned streets. Instead of digging traditional basements, never mind hammering in piles that would be anchored on bedrock, a dedicated crew laid plumbing and electrical wiring directly onto the ground and poured standardized concrete slabs. Then pre-cut lumber kits would be delivered directly to the site. One team did nothing but erect framing studs, followed by a separate team that nailed down the prefabricated wall siding and roof trusses. Interior workers would walk through in waves. Separate crews were responsible for tiling floors or installing prefabricated modular windows or spray painting the walls. Finally, another team rolled out uniform sod and planted a tree every 28 feet along the property line. No master carpenters, no masons, no specialists, no craftsmanship. Multiple teams, multiple crews. At peak production, Levitt's construction line could build 1,000 houses per month. Each house cost $8,000, just under 100,000 in today's money. Veterans could get special loans guaranteed by the government from the bank. The scale of the operation was so massive that the homes sold faster than they could be built. Okay, so Levitt identified the problem, a housing crisis. He proposed to profit by solving it, and that's fine, commendable, in fact. Except neither he nor anyone else thought of it as a temporary measure. Barracks? No. Houses. Disposable? Glorified shanties? No. Homes. Identical house models, identical spacing, identical setbacks, identical roof lines, lots of right angles, no ornament. And the cheapest possible materials. Timber frame rather than brick and mortar or stone. Uh, some Europeans who wish to feel superior point to certain centuries old European villages whose houses were built to last. Those same Europeans, well, some of them anyway, posit that suburbia is strictly a North American phenomenon, as in, we wouldn't have any of that shit here. That's because we're cultured, sophisticated people, unlike those Yankees. First of all, please. This is a suburb just outside of Zurich. Here's a breathtaking view of a hotel in that same suburb. And this shit town is right outside of Paris. Second of all, one of the striking differences between the architecture of, say, Paris and Rome is that in Paris, limestone is practically under one's feet. Quarry, carve, and stack. No need to transport it. In Rome, where limestone was not readily available, many buildings are brick and mortar, specifically in Trastevere. But hey, the Colosseum consists entirely of bricks buried in Roman concrete. During the Middle Ages, portions of Europe experienced deforestation. The plague would ebb, the population would grow exponentially, and suddenly folks looked around and saw that every single tree had been already cut down and dragged off and put to good use for shipbuilding, house building, firewood, furniture. No more trees, gone. So in Paris, it made sense economically to use the limestone under one's feet. Now, when all is said and done, which country do you think has more limestone, France or the United States?
I'll bet it's the latter. The United States.
Of course, we've got more good building material than any other country on the planet. Limestone, sandstone, granite, marble, we've got it all. Millions of tons of it. The problem is the distances, American distances. Most cities are natural developments. They arise because there's easy access to water, there's arable land, and the geography is suitable. So does Boston, New York, Philly, Chicago, good. And there's plenty of limestone, but it's way over there, hundreds of miles away. Granite? There's plenty of granite in New Hampshire. But New Hampshire is 300 miles from New York. That's roughly what? The distance between Paris and Lyon. In the meantime, all along the east coast of these United States, trees are everywhere. Timber is everywhere. In Levitt's day, it was cheap, it was practically free. Another clever move on Levitt's part was the use of drywall, also known as sheetrock.
I hate sheetrock.
Sheetrock was invented in 1916, but it sold poorly. Walls were made either of brick or mortar or layers of lath, lime, and plaster. Before World War II, drywall was openly mocked by master builders, architects, and the public. It was called sacket board, cheap substitute, or cardboard houses. But when the housing crisis hit, folks quickly agreed that paper-thin walls hanging on timber planks were just fine. $58 a month, loans guaranteed by the US government, lots of nature, clean air, our own country estate, ownership. Let's move. In one of my recent Patreon videos, I discussed the nature of ownership, why it comes off as attractive, almost irresistible, and why it's mostly just smoke and mirrors. My Patreon page consists entirely of videos about exciting matters other than architecture. History, culture, music, the economy, movies, and on and on. There's also one video on how you can instantly improve the quality of your snapshots 1,000-fold. Support this channel, please, and my Patreon page by subscribing. Now let's get back to the suburbs. One of the problems was how do you get there? To your countryside mansion with cardboard walls. Speaking of dishonest ornament, certain types of siding are faux brick and others are faux limestone, which means that deep down people actually know what a real house should look like.
So, how do you get there?
You're so impatient.
Sheesh.
Okay. Long Island Railroad is a one-line system with a few branches. It runs roughly through the middle of the island. In the original Levitt town, the distance between your shanty and the nearest train station would be a few miles. Walking is good for you, but there are no sidewalks, and the journey is monotonous, tedious, unnerving, and might take you over an hour one way. So you drive to the station. You leave the car there, and when you get back, you disembark from the train and drive home. Or you can drive all the way to Manhattan or Brooklyn and either find parking, good luck with that, or pay for a spot in a garage. Your wife and kids may be left stranded, stuck in the house with no easy means of getting anywhere, but that's a minor detail. Or maybe you'll get a second car. Or maybe she'll drop you off at the train station in the morning and then pick you up at night. You see, by the mid-1950s, folks began to suspect something. The automobile dependency was ruining both the cities and the countryside. So there and then, it was time to call this whole suburbia experiment an epic fail and take emergency measures. Roll it back. Instead, in the year of our Lord 1956, to the delight of Robert Moses and William Levitt, President Eisenhower signed
The Federal Aid Highway Act.
allocating funds for the construction of 41,000 miles of the interstate highway system over a 10-year period. Today, the maintenance of that very system costs taxpayers $250 billion each year. He should have known better, but, Eisenhower, he was a War Department observer, a lieutenant colonel, when in the summer of 1919, the US Army wanted to see if it could move a military unit across the country in an emergency. They were going from the East Coast to the West Coast, so once the convoy passed Illinois, paved roads disappeared. There were dirt paths, shifting quicksand, and mud. Trucks routinely broke through flimsy wooden bridges. 88 of those had to be destroyed and rebuilt just across the country. Vehicles frequently rolled over, sank into the mud up to their axles, and suffered mechanical failures. The trek took 62 days, averaging 6 miles per hour. 26 years later, as Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, Eisenhower was impressed by Germany's Autobahn, a massive network of high-speed, multi-lane divided concrete highways that had been championed by Adolf Hitler in the 1930s. So the future president said to himself, like, wow, we absolutely need to build something like this back home. And so the car-centric culture experiment continued unabated. Levitt could breathe easier. His car-centric suburbia was safe. Apart from the unnerving monotony of its setup, another one of suburbia's problems surfaced quickly: the absence of viable civic space. As in, no place where people from the same area could gather without scheduling. Just pop in, talk to neighbors, or just sit and read a book. Man is a gregarious animal. We need company. The traditional American small town, destroyed by the Suburbia project, featured Main Street. You know, the church, the bank, the saloon, the pharmacy, the sheriff's office, the barber shop, the tavern. What made the businesses like the tavern commercially viable was the fact that Main Street was a hub, a place with lots of foot traffic. People visited the small town on business, like from all over the area, some of them on a daily basis. And once their business was concluded, they'd pop in the church, the general store, and specifically the tavern, or the inn, or the saloon before going home. You know, a place where everybody knows your name, just to hang out, have a coffee or a drink, shoot the breeze. It was a perfect place to make friends, like an informal social club. That is completely out of the question in Levitt's suburbia. There are, to be sure, commercial centers positioned along main thoroughfares, which you can only reach by car. They're built strictly for commerce, not lingering. You go there to buy groceries, drop off dry cleaning, but not sit and read a book for 3 hours. There are restaurants, some of them upscale, but no neighborhood hangouts. A genuine neighborhood hangout can only be commercially viable when supported by foot traffic. You don't drive to it. You walk and you drop by. Because there were no neutral indoor gathering spaces, social life was effectively privatized into the home. If you were hell-bent on socializing, you had to host a backyard barbecue or attend a cocktail party in someone's living room, you know, with synthetic carpeting, tchotchkes on racks, and family vacation photos on the upright piano. But that only works in summer. New York winters can be harsh. The pool is covered with a tarp. Nobody wants to hang out outside, while indoor parties are scheduled events. I mean, you can't just drop by someone's house whenever you feel like it and go, hey, I'll just sit in the corner and read. Is that okay with you? And what about the kids?
Yes, what about the kids?
They meet, they gather, they socialize at school. The building that looks like a prison because ornament is dishonest and Vitruvian proportion is dated, to which they're either driven by their parents or bussed. They have the occasional sleepover party. Some are taken by their parents to various activities, including music lessons and structured baseball or basketball or football games. Everything's scheduled and nothing is free. Teenagers, they do hang out in parking lots adjacent to commercial centers along the main thoroughfare. Nobody walks except to walk one's dog. Walking is discouraged, in fact. There are no sidewalks, remember? In the late 19th century New York row houses, cornices did a few important things at once. They unified the street visually, like a continuous wave of skyline. They cast shadow lines that add depth even in flat light. They made the buildings look presentable, eye-pleasing, cozy. They were mass-produced sheet metal or wood pieces. They weren't economically extravagant. Levitt absolutely could have used something similar. In fact, post-war construction had the industrial capacity to do it even more cheaply than before.
Let me guess, he didn't.
No, he didn't. We're going to get a little technical for a moment, just a tiny bit. Bear with me. Suburbs are inferior to high-density cities because of the spatial dispersion. They're spread out, which requires vastly more infrastructure, material, and energy to service the same number of people. In a high-density city, a single massive vertical pipe can supply water and remove waste for hundreds of families simultaneously. A 50-foot segment of main pipe under a city street might serve a 20-story building with 200 apartments. The infrastructure required per person is measured in inches. Now, because Levitt-style suburbs spread single-family homes across expansive lots, that same 50-foot segment of street pipe might only reach one or two houses. To connect those same 200 families, a suburb requires miles of underground piping. Exponentially more raw material like copper, PVC, iron, concrete is required just to build the network. Moving liquids over vast horizontal distances requires an immense amount of energy. Fluid pressure loss due to friction is directly proportional to the length of the pipe. Because suburban pipe networks stretch for miles across sprawling subdivisions, water utilities must run high-powered electric pumps continuously to overcome frictional resistance and maintain water pressure to distant cul-de-sacs. Cities utilize verticality. Utilities often pump water up to a centralized rooftop water tower just once, and from there, gravity does 100% of the work, feeding water down to every apartment with zero added energy. The sheer physical footprint of suburban pipe infrastructure creates a compounding environmental nightmare over time. Every joint, valve, and every foot of pipe is a potential failure point. Because suburbs have miles of pile per capita, they lose millions of gallons of treated, drinkable water to underground leaks before it ever reaches a faucet. Aging suburban sewer pipes crack. When miles of sewer pipes leak, raw sewage infiltrates local water tables and streams. Conversely, during heavy rains, groundwater seeps into the sprawling sewer network, overwhelming treatment plants and causing toxic overflows. By prioritizing horizontal sprawl over vertical density, suburbia locked today's society into a permanent energy tax, requiring a massive, leaky, power-hungry underground grid just to keep the lights on and toilets flushing. So the next big question is, why does the so-called value of those barracks, those glorified shanties, why does it continue to go up and up? I'll give you a hint. It has nothing to do with population growth, which in the New York metro area is relatively low. Nor is it about those disposable shacks themselves. Many of them have been rebuilt, some of them multiple times, and the new ones are just as ugly as their predecessors. Some have marble countertops in the kitchen, and jacuzzis, and climate control, and Chateau Lafite on the wine rack, never to be opened, the collector's item. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
So, what's the answer?
It's the land. It used to be cheap. Now the price is sky high. Why? I mean, land is one thing we don't seem to lack in America. There's lots and lots of it. No pun intended. There are areas where you can drive for hours without seeing another human being. The big issue that everyone is marginally aware of, but no one's willing to discuss, not even at soirees, is that William Levitt's scheme only works or used to work around big cities. Suburbs, which are neither urban nor rural, a maladjusted hybrid, can only exist by leeching off the city. Let's not blame William Levitt for everything. He had plenty of help. His imitators, his colleagues. Levitt's territory was Long Island and a portion of Pennsylvania. Oh, yeah, and that little project he ran in France. And that's it. The rest, others came, others saw, others copied. And thanks to those efforts, all of that land, the land around big cities, is all used up today. New York, Philly, Boston, DC, Chicago, Detroit, San Fran, Austin, New Orleans, it's all been bought up and developed. There's no more room. And the zoning laws prevent developers from erecting multi-story residential buildings. So there's this quasi-artificial scarcity.
Don't forget the traffic.
Ah, yes, the traffic. There's the traffic. All three highways, the Southern State and the Northern State, built by Robert Moses, and the Long Island Expressway, sanctioned and blessed by President Eisenhower, are perpetually backed up in both directions because there's just no way to get around. Because your workplace, your home, and places that offer any sort of entertainment, like good food and civilized conversation, those places are miles and miles apart. And by the way, how are you and your party supposed to get home when all of you are drunk out of your skulls? Thank you for watching. I'm Ricky Vernio coming to you from Brooklyn, New York, and I'll see you soon.